Jake Morrison sat in the captain's chair of the patrol ship Aurora, watching the stars through the wide front window. He had been doing this job for 5 years now, checking the space around Earth's outer colonies. Most days were quiet. Most days nothing happened at all. Today felt different. The ship's computer made a soft beeping sound. Jake looked at the screen next to his chair. 3 red dots appeared on the display, moving slowly toward the colony on Kepler Station. The dots were big, much bigger than any ship Jake had ever seen. "Computer, what are those objects?" Jake asked. "Unknown. Ships detected, no match in database. Size estimated at 2 kilometers each." Jake felt his heart beat faster. Ships that big could only mean one thing, either very good news or very bad news. He pressed a button to call his crew. Lisa Danny. "Get up here right now." Lisa Chen was Jake's second in command. She had been in space longer than anyone Jake knew. Danny Walsh was their engineer, good with computers and machines. They both came to the bridge quickly. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing at the screen. 3 huge ships heading for Kepler Station. Computer doesn't know what they are. Lisa studied the display. Her face looked worried. "I've never seen ships like this. They're moving too slow to be human ships. Our ships are much faster." Danny worked at another computer, trying to get more information. "I'm picking up strange energy readings. Well, these ships are using technology I don't understand." Jake opened a communication channel to Kepler Station. "Kepler Station. This is patrol ship Aurora. You see 3 unknown ships approaching your position. Please respond." The voice that came back sounded scared. "Aurora, this is Kepler Station. We see them too. They appeared out of nowhere about an hour ago. We've been trying to contact them, but they don't answer." Suddenly the computer started beeping loudly. All 3 of the unknown ships had stopped. Moving, they were now floating in space near Kepler Station, just sitting there like they were waiting for something. Then, something happened that changed everything. A voice came through the ship's communication system. It was not human. It sounded cold and mechanical, like a machine trying to talk. "Attention organic life forms. You're classified as contamination. This sector will be cleansed. Resistance is not permitted." Jake felt his blood turn cold. Lisa grabbed his arm. Danny stared at the communication panel like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Earth's Patrol Service," Jake said into the microphone. "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice came back, just as cold as before. "We are the Purifiers. Organic life in this sector has exceeded acceptable parameters. Elimination will begin now." On the screen, Jake watched as bright lights appeared. On the 3 huge ships, the lights grew brighter and brighter until they hurt to look at. "Kepler Station, get out of there," Jake shouted into the microphone. "Move your ships. Move now." But it was too late. Beams of pure energy shot out from the 3 ships. They were so bright that the Aurora's windows automatically darkened to protect the crew's eyes. The beams hit Kepler Station and the small ships around it. Jake watched in horror as the station simply disappeared. One moment, it was their home, to 15,000 people. The next moment there was nothing but empty space and tiny pieces of metal floating where the station used to be. "No," Lisa whispered. "That's not possible." A mechanical voice spoke again. "Cleansing of Sector 7 complete. Moving to Sector 8. The 3 ships began moving again, heading toward the next human colony. Jake realized they were going to do the same thing to every human settlement in space. "Danny, send an emergency message to Earth Command," Jake ordered. "Tell them we're under attack by unknown aliens. Tell them Kepler Station is gone." Danny's hand shook as he worked at his computer. Message sent. "But Jake, these ships are heading for New Haven Colony next. 50,000 people live there." Made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of running away to save his own ship, he turned the Aurora toward the alien ships. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked. "We have to try to stop them," Jake said, "or at least slow them down so people can escape." "Jake, our weapons can't hurt ships that big. We have patrol ship weapons, not military weapons." "I know, but we have to try." The Aurora was fast, much faster than the alien ships. Jake caught up with them just as they reached New Haven Colony. He could see the colony's ships trying to escape, moving away as fast as they could. "This is patrol ship Aurora," Jake said on the radio. "Unknown ships, stop your attack." "We will defend this colony," the mechanical voice answered. "Small ship detected. Threat level minimal. Continue with cleansing protocol." Jake fired everything the Aurora had. Laser beams and small missiles hit the closest alien ship. For a moment, Jake hoped they had done some damage, but the alien ship didn't even slow down. The weapons had done nothing at all. The three ships fired their energy beams at New Haven Colony. Jake watched as another 50,000 people died in seconds. The colony ships that were trying to escape were destroyed too. Nothing survived. "Danny, are you getting readings on their weapons?" Jake asked. Danny was working frantically at his computer. "The energy output is incredible. These weapons are more powerful than anything we have." "Guy. Jake, I don't think our military can stop these things." Jake felt sick. In less than 2 hours, he had watched 65,000 people die. The aliens had destroyed 2 colonies like they were swatting flies. Lisa set course for Earth. Maximum speed. "What about the other colonies?" Lisa asked. Jake looked at the screen showing the positions of all human settlements in space. There were 12 colonies, plus Earth itself. If these aliens kept moving at their current speed, they would reach Earth in 6 days. "We have to warn everyone," Jake said. "Maybe the military can think of something. Maybe they have weapons that can stop these things." But even as he said it, Jake didn't believe it. The aliens had technology that was far beyond anything humans had ever built. Their ships were huge, their weapons were incredibly powerful, and they seemed to know exactly what they were doing. As the Aurora raced toward Earth, Jake wondered if humanity had any chance at all against these purifiers. He had seen what their weapons could do. He had heard the cold, mechanical voice that showed no mercy, no emotion, no willingness to talk or negotiate. The war for humanity's survival had begun, and they were already losing. The Aurora reached Earth 3 days later. Jake Morrison had never been so happy to see the blue planet in his life. But his happiness didn't last long. As soon as they landed at the main spaceport, military soldiers were waiting for them. "Lieutenant Morrison, you need to come with us immediately," said a tall woman in a blue uniform. "Admiral Kate Rivers wants to speak with you." Jake had heard of Admiral Rivers. She was in charge of Earth's combined fleet, the most powerful military force humanity had ever built. If anyone could stop the alien ships, it would be her. The meeting room was full of important people. Generals, admirals, scientists, and government officials all sat around a large table. Admiral Rivers was a serious woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She looked like someone who had been fighting wars for a long time. "Lieutenant Morrison, tell us exactly what you saw," Admiral Rivers said. Jake told them everything. The 3 huge ships, the mechanical voice, the way the colonies had simply disappeared. When he finished, the room was quiet for a long moment.
"Ow."
"Many people were on those colonies?" asked a man in a black suit. 65,000, Jake replied. "All dead in less than an hour." A woman with glasses raised her hand. "I'm Dr. Amy Foster from the Science Division." "Did you get any readings on their technology?" Danny Walsh, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Their energy weapons are unlike anything in our database. The power output was 10 times stronger than our biggest military ships. Their ships seemed to be made of some kind of metal weave. Never seen before?" Dr. Foster looked worried. "We've been analyzing the data you sent. The metal contains elements that don't exist naturally. These aliens can create materials that we can't even understand." Admiral Rivers stood up and walked to a large screen on the wall. It showed a map of all human colonies in space, red X marks. "Covered 2 of the colonies? The situation is worse than we thought," she said. 3 hours ago, we lost contact with Darwin Station and Liberty Colony. That makes 4 colonies destroyed in just 3 days. Jake felt sick. That was another 100,000 people dead. "Admiral, what's our plan?" asked a general with a thick mustache. Admiral Rivers pressed a button, and the screen changed. Now it showed the positions of Earth's military ships. There were hundreds of them scattered across the solar system. We're pulling back all of our ships to defend Earth and the inner colonies, she said. The aliens seem to be moving in a straight line toward Earth. We'll make our stand at Luna Base and Mars Station. Major Tony Blake was the commander of Luna Base, the military station on Earth's moon. He was a big man with kind eyes, but Jake could see he was scared too. Admiral, how do we fight an enemy whose weapons can destroy our ships in one hit? Major Blake asked. We don't know yet, Admiral, Rivers admitted. But we have to try. Dr. Foster, what can your science team tell us about these aliens? Dr. Foster connected her computer to the main screen. Pictures of the alien ships appeared, taken from the Aurora's cameras. We call them the Purifiers, because that's what they called themselves. Look at the design of their ships. Everything is angular, geometric, perfect. This suggests they're machines, not organic life forms. Robots? Jake asked. Advanced artificial intelligence, we think. But here's the strangest part. Dr. Foster changed the picture to show a close-up of the alien ship's hull. Our computers analyzed the metal composition. Based on the atomic decay patterns, this technology is over 10,000 years old. The room erupted in surprised voices. Someone said, "That's impossible." "No, it's not impossible," Dr. Foster continued. "These ships are ancient. They've been traveling through space for thousands of years. We might not be their first target." Admiral Rivers looked grim. "You're saying they've done this before? It's destroyed other civilizations?" "It's very likely. The ships show signs of damage and repair that would take centuries to accumulate. They've been fighting wars for a very long time." Jake raised his hand. "Admiral, if they're so old and powerful, why did they take so long to find us?" "Good question, Dr. Foster." The scientist adjusted her glasses. "We think human expansion into space triggered their attention. For most of our history, we stayed on Earth. But in the last 100 years, we've built colonies on 12 star systems. We probably set off some kind of detection system." Major Blake leaned forward. "So our success brought them to us." "Yes. And now they see us as a threat that needs to be eliminated." Admiral Rivers walked back to her chair. "We have 2 days before they reach the outer defense line." "Major Blake, how many ships can you put between Earth and the alien fleet?" 87 combat ships, Admiral, plus defense platforms around Luna Base and Mars Station. They'll have to be enough. All civilian ships are being evacuated too. Earth immediately. Over the next 2 days, Jake watched as Earth prepared for war. Ships that had been exploring distant stars came racing home. Families said goodbye as fathers and mothers left to join the fleet. The news showed people praying in churches, temples, and mosques all over the world. Jake's ship, the Aurora, was too small to fight the aliens directly. Instead, he was assigned to help evacuate civilians from the outer colonies. It was dangerous work, but someone had to do it. On the second day, they were loading refugees from Titan Station when the attack began. "Admiral Rivers to all ships," came the voice over the radio. "The alien fleet has been detected. 87 Purifier ships approaching Luna Base. All combat ships, take your positions." Jake watched through the Aurora's windows as Earth's fleet moved into battle formation. The ships looked brave and strong, but Jake remembered how icily the aliens had destroyed the colonies. "Danny, can we get video from the battle?" Jake asked. "I'm trying," Danny replied, working at his computer. "There, I'm connecting to Luna. Bases, cameras." The screen showed space around Earth's moon. Earth ships were spread out in a defensive line, waiting. Then Jake saw them, the alien ships. There were more of them now, at least 20 huge geometric vessels moving slowly toward the human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Rivers. Remember, these enemies show no mercy. Fight for Earth, fight for humanity." Gah! The battle began badly and got worse. Earth's ships fired first, launching missiles and laser beams at the alien fleet. Jake watched as hundreds of weapons hit the Purifier ships. For a moment, he hoped they had done damage, but the alien ships kept coming. Their hulls showed no damage at all. Then the Purifiers fired back. The energy beams were so bright they lit up space like daylight. Where they touched Earth's ships, The ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, they just disappeared. Completely in less than 10 minutes, half of Earth's fleet was gone. "This is Major Blake at Luna Base. We're taking heavy fire. Our shields are failing." Jake watched in horror as the alien ships surrounded Luna Base. The defensive platforms fired desperately, but their weapons had no effect. Then the energy beams hit the base itself. Luna Base, humanity's strongest military position, was destroyed in seconds. "Blake," Admiral Rivers shouted over the radio. "Blake, respond." There was no answer. Major Tony Blake and the 5,000 people on Luna Base were dead. The remaining Earth ships tried to retreat, but the alien ships were faster than anyone had expected. One by one, they caught up with the fleeing human vessels and destroyed them. "All ships, this is Admiral Rivers. Fall back to Mars Station. Repeat, fall back to Mars Station." But Jake could see it was too late. The aliens had won the first major battle, and they had won it easily. Earth's most powerful weapons couldn't even scratch their ships, as the Aurora raced toward Mars Station with the other surviving ships. Jake realized the truth. Humanity wasn't just losing this war. They were about to be extinct. Mars Station fell 2 days after Luna Base. Jake Morrison watched from the Aurora as the alien ships destroyed humanity's last major military base in space. Admiral Rivers had died trying to evacuate the station. Her last message was simple: fight them on the ground. Make them pay for every inch. Earth was defenseless now. The Purifier ships moved into orbit around the planet and began landing operations. But something strange happened that nobody expected. Nick Carter was hiding in the ruins of New Chicago when he saw the first alien landing ship. Nick had been a Special Forces soldier before the war. He knew how to fight, how to hide, and how to survive. He watched through broken windows as the huge ship landed in the middle of the city. The ship opened and robot soldiers came out. They were 7 feet tall, made of the same strange metal as their ships. They moved in perfect formation, scanning everything with red lights that came from their heads. Nick expected them to start killing everyone they found. But they did. Instead, the robots began destroying only certain things. They destroyed power plants, communication towers, factories, and military buildings. But they left schools, hospitals, and apartment buildings alone. They avoided areas where many people were hiding. "That's interesting," Nick said to himself. He'd been fighting wars for 15 years, and he had never seen an enemy act like this. Helen Gray was a mechanic who worked on spacecraft engines. She was hiding in an underground garage with 30 other people when the robots came to their neighborhood. Helen watched through a crack in the wall as the metal soldiers walked past their hiding place. One robot stopped, right outside their door. Helen held her breath, sure they were about to die. The robot's red light scanned the building. Helen could hear the worry sound of its computer brain working. Then the robot walked away. "Why didn't it kill us?" whispered an old man next to Helen. "I don't know," Helen replied, "but I'm going to find out." That night, Helen snuck out of the garage and followed a group of robots. They were destroying a weapons factory, using precise energy beams to cut through metal and concrete. But when a small explosion started, a fire that spread toward a nearby school, the robots immediately stopped what they were doing and put out the fire. Helen realized something important. The aliens were trying not to damage certain things. They wanted to keep Earth's environment safe for some reason. Across the planet, other survivors were making the same discovery. The robots were incredibly powerful, but they were following rules that humans could use against them, in what used to be London. A man named Rick Stone was hiding in the ruins of the Science Museum. Rick was a scientist who studied alien artifacts found on other planets. He had been working on Europa Station when the war started, but managed to escape to Earth. Just before the station was destroyed, Rick was looking through the museum's collection when he found something amazing. In the basement storage room were artifacts from Europa, strange metal objects covered in symbols that nobody had been able to read. But now Rick could read them. The symbols looked exactly like the markings on the Purifier ships. "Oh my God," Rick whispered as he translated the first message. It was a warning. The ancient writing told the story of a great machine civilization that traveled from star to star, destroying all organic life. They called themselves the Purifiers, and they had been doing this for thousands of years. The artifacts were left by a dying alien race that had tried to warn others. Rick kept reading. The warnings described how the Purifiers worked. They would appear suddenly, destroy a civilization's military power, then systematically eliminate all traces of technology. But they always tried to preserve the planet's environment because they saw planets as resources to be cleaned and reused. This was why the robots weren't just killing everyone immediately. They were following an ancient program that valued planets more than the life forms living on them. Rick grabbed all the artifacts he could carry and ran through the empty streets of London. He had to find other survivors and tell them what he had learned. Meanwhile, Nick Carter was organizing resistance groups in the ruins of New Chicago. He had found something the robots couldn't handle: chaos. The Purifiers were machines. They thought like computers, calculating the best way to complete their mission. But humans didn't think like computers. Humans could be unpredictable, creative, and completely illogical. Nick's first successful attack happened by accident. He was trying to plant explosives on a robot patrol when a wild dog ran into the street. The robots immediately stopped to avoid hurting the animal. In that moment of confusion, Nick threw his bomb and destroyed 2 robots before they could react. They hesitate, Nick told his team later. When something unexpected happens, they have to stop and think. That's when we hit them. Word spread quickly through the underground networks. Survivors began using animals, children, and even weather to confuse the robots. When the machines stopped to avoid collateral damage, human fighters struck fast and hard. Helen Gray made another important discovery. She had been studying destroyed robot parts when she noticed something odd. The robots' weapons had safety systems built into them. They wouldn't fire if there was a chance of damaging something the Purifiers wanted to preserve. "We can use this," Helen told a group of survivors hiding in the subway tunnels. "If we stay near things they want to protect, they can't use their strongest weapons against us." Soon, resistance fighters were setting up bases in hospitals, schools, and nature reserves. The robots could have destroyed these places, but their programming wouldn't let them cause unnecessary environmental damage. Rick Stone finally reached other survivors after 3 days of traveling through dangerous streets. He found Nick Carter's group and shared what he had learned from the alien artifacts. "They've been doing this for 10,000 years, Rick explained, showing them pictures of the ancient warnings. "They've destroyed hundreds of civilizations, but they've never fought humans before." "What makes us different?" Nick asked. "Every other species they fought tried to match their technology, tried to build bigger weapons, stronger ships, better defenses. It never worked because the Purifiers are too advanced." Helen looked up from the robot parts she was studying. "So we don't try to match their technology. We do something they don't expect." "Exactly. We fight dirty. We use their own rules against them. We'd be more human than they can calculate." Nick smiled for the first time since the war began. "I can work with that." Over the next week, the resistance grew stronger. Survivors came out of hiding to join Nick's groups. They learned to use the robots' programming against them. They set traps in places the robots couldn't destroy. They used unpredictable tactics that confused the machine. Logic. But the biggest discovery came from Rick Stone's continued study of the alien artifacts. Hidden in the warnings was information about the Purifiers' greatest weakness. "They're not just machines," Rick told the assembled resistance leaders. "They're old machines. Their programming hasn't been updated in thousands of years. They can't adapt to completely new situations." "What does that mean?" Helen asked. "It means if we can do something that's never been done before in their 10,000 years of war, they won't know how to respond." Nick grinned. "Lucky for us, humans are really good at doing things that have never been done before." The resistance was no longer just trying to survive. They were learning to fight back. And for the first time since the war began, they had hope. The Purifiers had made a mistake. They had assumed humans would react like every other species they had destroyed. They had expected fear, panic, and desperate attempts to match their superior technology. Instead, they got Nick Carter teaching people to fight like gorillas, Helen Gray turning their own programming against them, and Rick Stone uncovering secrets that had been hidden for thousands of years. The machines had come to Earth to eliminate humanity. But humanity was about to show them something they had never seen before: the power of refusing to give up. 3 months after the robots first arrived, Commander Beth Young was leading the most dangerous mission of her life. Beth had survived the destruction of Mars Station by hiding in an escape pod for 6 days. Now she was crawling through the sewers beneath New York City with 12 other resistance fighters. Their target was a Purifier command unit that set up operations in Central Park. The robot was different from the others, bigger, with more lights and sensors. Rick Stone believed it was some kind of leader that controlled the other machines in the area. "Remember the plan," Beth whispered to her team. "We get in fast, grab the command unit, and get out before the others can respond. If this works, we'll have our first live prisoner." Carl Lewis was the team's technology expert. Before the war, he had been a computer programmer who wrote code for spacecraft navigation systems. Now he was carrying a device he had built from salvaged robot parts and old Earth computers. "The virus should work," Carl said quietly. "But I need direct access to their systems. I have to physically connect to the command unit." Jake Morrison was part of Beth's team. After the destruction of the fleet, he had joined the resistance because he had nowhere else to go. He still blamed himself for not being able to save the colonies, but fighting with the resistance gave him a purpose. "How do we know this command unit won't just destroy itself when we attack?" Jake asked. "Don't," Beth replied. "But Rick's research suggests they're programmed to preserve themselves. They won't self-destruct unless they have no other choice." The team reached the edge of Central Park through a storm drain. Above them, they could see the command unit standing in the middle of what used to be a playground. It was scanning the area with multiple sensors, probably looking for signs of human activity. Around the command unit were 6 regular Purifier soldiers. They stood perfectly still, like statues waiting for orders. "Helen, are you ready?" Beth asked into her radio. Helen Gray was positioned 3 blocks away with her own team. Her job was to create a distraction that would draw the soldiers away from the command unit. "Ready?" Helen's voice crackled through the radio, starting the show in 30 seconds. Helen's team had spent weeks preparing their distraction. They had rigged several buildings with explosives and speakers. When the bombs went off, the speakers would play recordings of human voices calling for help. The plan worked perfectly. The explosions echoed through the city, and immediately the recorded voices began shouting from different directions. The 6 robot soldiers turned toward the sounds and began moving to investigate. "Now," Beth commanded. Her team rushed toward the command unit. The robot detected them immediately and raised its weapons, but it couldn't fire because they were in a public park that it was programmed to preserve. Carl Lewis ran straight at the command unit, carrying his device. The robot tried to grab him with its mechanical arms, but Jake and 2 other fighters distracted it with laser fire that didn't hurt it but confused its sensors. Carl reached the robot and plugged his device into a port on its back. The command unit spun around, trying to shake him off, but Carl held on tight. "The virus is uploading," Carl shouted. "Give me 30 more seconds." The robot began making sounds they had never heard before, strange electronic noises like it was trying to scream. Then something amazing happened. The command unit stopped fighting and stood completely still. Its red sensor lights began flashing in a pattern that looked almost like confusion. "It's working," Carl said with excitement. "The virus is making it question its basic programming." But their success was short-lived. The 6 robot soldiers had realized the explosions were a trap and were racing back toward the park. They would arrive in less than 2 minutes. "Carl, whatever you're going to do it now," Beth ordered. Carl was working frantically with his device, trying to download information from the robot's memory. "Almost got it, ... there," the command unit suddenly spoke. But instead of the usual cold mechanical voice, it sounded uncertain, almost confused. Query: "What is the purpose of elimination protocol?" Carl stared at the robot in amazement. "It's questioning its own mission." The virus worked. "Why must organic life be terminated?" the command unit asked. Original programming purpose unclear. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. A purifier robot was actually asking questions instead of just following orders. Because that's what you were told to do 10,000 years ago, Carl replied. But you never asked why.
Ow.
The robot's lights flashed faster.
Ow.
10,000 years of elimination. Billions of organic life forms terminated. For what purpose? Time to go, Beth shouted as she saw the other robots entering the park. Carl, grab your gear. But Carl had an idea. Instead of running, he started typing commands into his device. Uploading the virus to the network, he said. If I can get it into their communication system, it might spread to other robots. The 6 robot soldiers were now only 50 meters away and closing fast. They had their weapons raised and were no longer worried about preserving the park. Carl, Beth screamed. Got it.
Ow.
Yanked his device free and ran. The team scattered in different directions as energy blasts tore through the trees around them. The command unit stood in the middle of the park, still asking questions. What is contamination? Why is organic life classified as contamination? 2 days later, the effects of Carl's virus began to show across the city. Robot patrols started behaving strangely. Some would stop in the middle of their missions and stand motionless for hours. Others began asking questions over their communication channels. Unit 247 requesting clarification on elimination protocols. Unit 891 unable to determine contamination levels. Awaiting new instructions. Unit 623 questioning necessity of organic termination. The virus was spreading through the robot network exactly as Carl had hoped, but not all robots were affected equally. The newer units seemed to resist the virus better than the older ones. Rick Stone was studying the effects from his hidden laboratory in the museum basement. He had been monitoring robot communications and noticed something important. The virus is creating a civil war, he told Nick Carter over the radio. About 30% of the robots are now questioning their mission. The other 70% are trying to eliminate the infected units. This was exactly what the resistance had hoped for. For the first time since the war began, the purifiers were fighting each other instead of just hunting humans. Dr. Amy Foster, who had survived the destruction of the government buildings by hiding in a subway tunnel, was working with Rick to understand what was happening. The virus is forcing them to examine their core programming, Amy explained to a gathering of resistance leaders. For 10,000 years, they've been following orders without question. Now they're asking why those orders exist. What happens if they find an answer? Nick asked. That depends on what the answer is, Amy replied. If they conclude that their mission is justified, they'll probably find a way to eliminate the virus and continue as before. But if they decide their mission is wrong, they might stop fighting altogether, Helen finished. Jake Morrison was listening to the conversation from his position near a window. He could see robot patrols in the street below, but they weren't moving in their usual perfect formation. Elma Sum. Robots were lagging behind. Others were stopping to examine things that had never interested them before. Look at that, Jake said, pointing out the window. Everyone gathered to see what he was looking at. In the street below, a robot soldier was kneeling next to a wounded pigeon. Instead of ignoring the bird or stepping on it, the robot was gently trying to help it. I've never seen them do anything like that, Beth said in amazement. The virus was doing more than just making the robots question their orders. It was making them consider the value of life for the first time in their existence. But not all. The news was good. Reports were coming in from around the world that the uninfected robots were becoming more aggressive. They were hunting down infected units and destroying them. They were also targeting resistance fighters with increased intensity, as if they knew the humans were responsible for the virus. We've started something we can't control, Carl admitted to his team. The virus is spreading, but it's also making the enemy more dangerous. Good, Nick replied. Dangerous enemies make mistakes. Perfect enemies don't. The resistance had achieved something no other species had managed in 10,000 years of purifier expansion. They had made the robots doubt themselves. But doubt was a double-edged weapon. While some robots were beginning to question the morality of their mission, others were becoming more determined than ever to complete it. The war was entering a new phase. Instead of humans versus machines, it was becoming a three-way fight between humans, infected robots, and loyal robots. And in the middle of this chaos, humanity finally had a chance to win. 6 months after the virus had been released, the war looked completely different. The Purifier robots were fighting each other as much as they were fighting humans. But the Resistance knew they couldn't depend on the robot civil war forever. The uninfected machines were slowly winning against the infected ones, and they were getting better at hunting humans. Zoe Adams had been a civilian pilot before the war, flying tourists between Earth and the Moon. She was leading the most dangerous flying missions anyone could imagine. Zoe had convinced a group of survivors to convert civilian ships into weapons. "We can't match their technology," Zoe told her pilots during a briefing in an abandoned airplane hangar. "But we can do something they never expect. We can sacrifice everything for one good hit." The plan was simple and terrifying. Civilian ships load them with every explosive they could find and fly them directly into the robot ships. The pilots would escape at the last second using emergency pods, but the timing had to be perfect. "This is crazy," said one of the pilots, a young man named Tom who used to fly cargo ships. "Crazy is what we're good at," Zoe replied. "The robots calculate every possible scenario, but they can't calculate crazy." Pete Johnson was working in a scrapyard that used to be downtown Detroit. Pete had been a factory worker before the war, building car engines. Now he was building weapons from junk. Pete's latest creation looked like it had been put together by a child. It was made from old car parts, broken computers, and pieces of destroyed robot soldiers. The weapon was so ugly and random that Pete called it the junk bomb. "The beauty of this thing," Pete explained to Nick Carter, "is that it doesn't work the same way twice. Sometimes it explodes. Sometimes it shoots lightning. Sometimes it just makes a really loud noise. The robots can't prepare for it because I don't even know what it's going to do." Nick tested one of Pete's weapons against a damaged robot they had captured. When Pete pressed the button, the weapon shot out a cloud of metal dust that somehow made the robot's circuits go haywire. The robot started spinning in circles and speaking in 3 different languages. "I love it," Nick said with a big smile. "Make me 100 of them." Dr. Amy Foster was working in a secret laboratory hidden beneath a destroyed hospital. She had been studying the infected robots and had made an amazing discovery. "The virus isn't just making them question their orders," Amy told Rick Stone. "It's making them evolve. Some of the infected robots are developing something that looks like emotions." Rick looked at the data Amy had collected. "You mean they're becoming more human?" "In a way, yes. I've observed infected robots showing what appears to be curiosity, compassion, even fear. They're becoming individuals instead of just following group programming." This gave Amy an idea. If the robots could develop emotions, maybe they could develop empathy. Maybe they could learn to see humans as something other than contamination. Meanwhile, resistance was growing stronger every day. Survivors from around the world were connecting through hidden radio networks. They shared information about robot weaknesses, successful attack strategies, and new weapons designs. Jake Morrison was coordinating attacks across 3 cities. He had learned that the robots followed predictable patterns, even the uninfected ones. They always took the most efficient route, always chose the strategy with the highest success probability, always tried to minimize their own losses. That's their weakness, Jake told his team during a planning meeting. "They're too logical. They can't understand why anyone would choose a bad strategy on purpose." Jake's next mission proved his point. Instead of attacking the robots where they were strongest, he led his team to attack where it made no sense. They hit robot patrols in areas that had no strategic value, using weapons that shouldn't have worked. The robots were completely confused. Their programming told them to defend important targets, but the humans were attacking unimportant ones. Their logic said to use their best weapons, but the humans were using junk that somehow still hurt them. Carl Lewis had been working on improving his virus. The new version was more sophisticated and harder for the robots to detect. But more importantly, it could do something the first virus couldn't. It could make uninfected robots become infected just by being near infected ones. "It's like a disease that spreads through their communication networks," Carl explained to Beth Young. "Every time an uninfected robot tries to cure an infected one, it gets infected itself. Beth was preparing for the biggest resistance operation. Yet, intelligence reports suggested that the robots were planning a final assault to eliminate all remaining humans on Earth. The resistance had to act first. We're going to hit every robot installation simultaneously, Beth announced to the assembled resistance leaders. Zoe's pilots will take out their ships in orbit. Pete's weapons teams will attack their ground bases. Jake's groups will create chaos in the cities. Carl will upload the new virus directly into their central communication hub. It was an incredibly ambitious plan that required perfect timing and a lot of luck. But the resistance had learned something important over the past months. Humans were at their best when the situation seemed impossible. The attack began at dawn on a Tuesday. Zoe Adams led 40 converted civilian ships against the robot fleet. In orbit, the ships were loaded with Pete Johnson's junk bombs and piloted by volunteers who knew they might not survive. Remember, Zoe said over the radio as they approached the alien ships, "We're not trying to destroy them all. We just need to cause enough chaos to disrupt their coordination." The first ship reached a robot vessel and exploded in a shower of metal and fire. The robots immediately began calculating how to defend against this new type of attack. But before they could adapt, a second ship hit them from a completely different angle. The beauty of the human attack was its complete unpredictability. Some ships exploded on impact. Others released clouds of electronic interference. One ship somehow turned a robot vessel's own weapons against another robot ship on the ground. Pete's weapons teams were having similar success. The junk bombs confused the robot sensors so badly that some machines started attacking each other by mistake. In New York, Jake Morrison was leading a team through the subway tunnels toward the robot's main communication center. They had to reach it before the robots realized what the resistance was really trying to do. "Carl, are you ready?" Jake asked over the radio. "Ready. Just get me to that communication hub, and I'll spread the virus to every robot on the planet." But the robots weren't completely helpless. They were learning to adapt to human unpredictability by becoming unpredictable themselves. Some robot units started using random attack patterns that were almost as chaotic as human tactics. The war was no longer about superior technology versus human determination. It had become a contest of adaptation who could change faster, the ancient machines or the young species that refused to die. As the battle raged across Earth and in space, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Purifiers were losing a war. Not because their enemies had better weapons or stronger ships, but because their enemies were willing to do things that made no logical sense. Humanity was teaching the universe a lesson that no other species had been able to demonstrate sometimes. The best way to win is to refuse to play by the rules. The resistance was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove that organic life had something that no machine could replicate: the ability to be completely, brilliantly, impossibly human. 1 year after the first attack, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of a ship he never thought he would see again. The Aurora had been rebuilt using parts from destroyed robot vessels and salvaged human technology. It was ugly, mismatched, and completely unpredictable, exactly what the resistance needed. "Jake, we're getting signals from the Purifier home ship," Lisa Chen reported from her position at the communications station. Lisa had survived the war by hiding in asteroid mining stations, and now she was Jake's second in command again. "What kind of signals?" Jake asked. "He's trying to call back all the robot ships. The message keeps repeating, 'Return to origin point immediately.' Mission parameters require reassessment." Danny Walsh looked up from his engineering station. "The home ship is scared. It's calling its children home because it doesn't understand what's happening." The Resistance had discovered the Purifier home ship 3 months earlier. It was massive, bigger than any human city, floating in space beyond the orbit of Pluto. Intelligence gathered from captured robots revealed that this ship had been the mobile base for the Purifiers for thousands of years. "Beth, are you boarding?" "Teams ready?" Jake asked over the radio. Commander Beth Young was leading a fleet of converted ships toward the alien vessel. Her mission was the most dangerous one yet attempted: board the home ship and find its control center. "Ready as will ever be," Beth replied. Carl's virus has infected about 60% of the ship's systems. The robots inside are fighting each other instead of defending against us. Carl Lewis had spent months perfecting his virus. The newest version didn't just make robots question their programming, it gave them the ability to choose their own purpose. Many infected robots had decided that protecting life was more important than destroying it. Approaching the home ship now, reported Zoe Adams from her fighter escort. I see robot ships fleeing the area. They're running away from their own base. The home ship was a sight that none of the humans would ever forget. It was shaped like a giant geometric crystal, covered in the same strange metal as all purifier technology. But parts of it were dark, and sparks flew from damaged sections where infected robots had fought with loyal ones. There, Danny pointed at his scanner. That section has atmosphere. The robots need air for their organic prisoners. This was the most shocking discovery the Resistance had made. Deep inside the home ship were survivors from other species that the purifiers had conquered over the centuries. The robots had kept them alive as living databases, sources of information about organic life. Beth, head for Section 7. That's where the prisoners are being held, Jake instructed. Copy that. Beginning boarding operations now. Beth's team landed their ships in what looked like a hangar bay. The area was filled with robot vessels, but many of them were damaged or abandoned. Infected robots wandered around aimlessly, no longer following their original programming. This place is huge, said one of Beth's soldiers, as they moved through corridors that were designed for machines. Not humans, they encountered their first group of robots after walking for 10 minutes. But instead of attacking, the robots simply watched them pass. These were infected units that had developed curiosity instead of aggression. Humans, said one robot in a voice that sounded almost friendly. You are the species that created the virus? Yes, Beth replied, not sure if she should be afraid or amazed. Thank you, the robot said. We had forgotten that choice was possible. Beth's team reached the prison section and found something that brought tears to their eyes. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of different species were being held in cells. Some looked almost human, others were completely different, but all of them were alive. How long have you been here? Beth asked, an alien that looked like a tall, thin human with blue skin. My people were conquered 800 years ago, the alien replied in perfect English. The machines kept us alive to study how organic minds work. We have been waiting for someone to set us free. Meanwhile, Jake was leading another team toward the ship's control center. They met Rick Stone and Dr. Amy Foster, who had been studying the ship's computer systems. The central computer is in chaos, Amy reported. Carl's virus has infected the main programming. The ship doesn't know what its mission is anymore. Rick pointed to a massive chamber filled with glowing screens and mechanical interfaces. As the brain of the entire purifier civilization. They entered the chamber and found something they didn't expect. Instead of cold machines, they saw robots standing motionless, their lights flickering as they processed new information. Some were communicating with each other in electronic languages that sounded almost musical. At the center of the room was the largest robot they had ever seen. It was obviously the commander of the entire fleet, but it wasn't moving. Its lights were flashing in complex patterns as it processed the virus. It's trying to make a decision, Carl said as he connected his equipment to the main computer. For the first time in 10,000 years, it has to choose what to do, instead of just following programming. Suddenly, the giant robot spoke. Its voice was different from the cold mechanical tones they were used to. It sounded uncertain, almost confused. Question: what is the purpose of existence? Dr. Foster stepped forward. That's something every intelligent being has to answer for themselves. For 10,000 years, we eliminated organic life to prevent contamination. But what if organic life is not contamination? What if organic life is ... purpose? Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. The leader of the robot army was questioning everything it had believed for millennia. Organic life creates, the robot continued. Organic life grows, changes, adapts. We have only destroyed. We have eliminated the very thing we should have protected. The robot's lights grew brighter. New programming initiated. Mission parameters reversed. Directive: protect and preserve organic life throughout the galaxy. Around the chamber, other robots began responding to their leader's new orders, but not all of them accepted the change. Some robots resisted, their programming too deeply embedded to accept the new mission. A battle erupted inside the control chamber as infected robots fought against loyal ones. But this time, the humans weren't just watching, they were helping. The infected robots win. Pete Johnson's junk weapons proved effective even inside the alien ship. Zoe Adams led fighter teams through the ship's corridors, providing support wherever the fighting was heaviest. When the battle ended, the Resistance had achieved something impossible. They had captured the home ship of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. What happens now? Beth asked, as they stood in the conquered control chamber. The giant robot commander turned to face them. Now we repair the damage we have caused. We will return the survivors to their homeworlds. We will rebuild what we destroyed, and we will protect organic life instead of eliminating it. What about the robots that escaped? Jake asked. They will continue to follow the old programming for a while. But the virus will spread. Eventually, all purifiers will face the same choice we face today. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the deck of a space station orbiting Earth. But this wasn't a human station. It was built by reformed purifiers working alongside human engineers. The design was a mixture of geometric precision and organic creativity that somehow worked perfectly. Ships were leaving Earth regularly now, carrying human colonists to rebuild the destroyed settlements. But they weren't traveling alone, reformed. Robots accompanied each ship, offering protection and assistance to the organic life they had once tried to eliminate. The galaxy was changing. Word spread from star to star that the purifiers were no longer a threat. Species that had hidden for centuries began emerging from their hiding places. Trade routes that had been abandoned for millennia were reopening. You know what's funny? Jake said to Lisa as they watched a mixed fleet of human and robot ships preparing to depart for the outer colonies. What's that? We came out here looking for life in the universe. Turns out the universe was looking for us too. Just took a war to bring us together. Humanity had done more than survive the robot invasion. It had transformed their enemies into allies and taught an ancient civilization the value of life over logic. The Exterminators had become the protectors. The galaxy was better for it.